Well, not surprisingly, I think given the general topic areas that Quality Digest plays in, one of the elements that our editorial often consider is the nature of the quality management system. Most of the time we think about a QMS holistically as an interlocking series of actions that combine to ensure that your organization can deliver products and services that meet the demands of your customers. Sometimes, however, in order to really improve your QMS, you need to kind of look at the tools that allow you to pull its elements apart and consider them as discrete entities. Not necessarily all that holistically, but also holistically as well as the component parts. And that's really the takeaway in the article, 5 Things Your Quality Management System Needs by Tim Lozier of ETQ. You can see it right there. It ran in the Quality Digest newsletter on Tuesday a few days ago. Now, the 5 elements that Lozier talks about in this article are flexibility, traceability, risk-based thinking, integration, and reporting. So I want to take a few minutes to consider each of these and maybe discuss them with you, Dirk, and kind of talk about why they're so important to a tools-based approach to a superior QMS. And again, I mean, understand that Tim's coming to this from ETQ.
Sure.
Actually doing a webinar with ETQ on this very topic next week, which I'll talk about at the end of the segment. But so understand he's talking about this from a tools-based perspective. He's talking about the things that you can do using software or other tools to improve your QMS and how that works. So the first one he's talking about here is flexibility. And the key word is configurable. I mean, too often those that help organizations manage their QMS expect you to adapt your systems to their solutions. I mean, instead, you really should be able to make the tool do your bidding for things like forms and reports, checklists, whatever you need to do. I mean, you're the customer. I mean, it's your QMS. You are the one that needs to answer to an auditor, right, at some level ultimately, about why you have systems in place and how you can ensure that ultimately what the deliverable is which is to deliver good products and services to your customers, are supported by what your QMS does and what the tools that you use to use your QMS does. So if you're jumping through hoops to bring in, let's say, a software system that you have to change a lot of what you're doing to fit into a bunch of boxes, that doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense, right?
You really need it to be configurable to what you're doing. You don't want to have to do more work to get it to that format first and then begin to understand how it fits. Do it the other way first. That's a better idea.
Right.
The other one is traceability. A big part of this involves kind of the sense of connection amongst those disparate sections of the enterprise. Many times, quality is lost, and so actually sometimes is gained as well, in the handoffs from one functional area to the next. And Lozier considers the example, say, of a customer complaint. It's a perfect example. We see this all the time, right? I mean, ideally, in a tools-based optimized QMS, the key data from the customer, which is like stuff like their name, their account number, their pricing information, their discounts they have, whatever it is going to have to be rekeyed from department to department. That happens a lot, actually, but it shouldn't have to be that way. The system should be able to suck that data through, so every handoff has the information. I mean, we've all had this experience where you have to repeat your customer, your name or your account number or your issue. What's your problem? Oh my gosh!
I just told them.
Done this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you know, in the phone tree, it's like it's crazy making.
Yeah.
So consider your customer, and if you're going to have an automated QMS, you want that kind of visibility that goes through your system from handoff to handoff. The other one is risk-based thinking, and really this, of course, is a big part of ISO 9001:2015. Risk-based thinking really means, first of all, investigating and categorizing the hazards unique to your enterprise. I mean, here we begin to understand the limits maybe of the tool-based approach a little bit, because while you can automatically evaluate risk, assessing what those risks mean for your enterprise requires a certain level of human interaction, right? I mean, you can do an FMEA and get a risk priority number, but unless there's a human being in there to analyze that and consider what that really means and how you can maybe mitigate that risk, you're not getting anything out of your RPN.
Right.
So that's really important.
Or does that RPN even make sense?
Even make sense.
Because sometimes it's like, really?
Yeah.
Honestly, that doesn't make sense.
Or maybe you look at it, you're like, really? And then you look at it like, it does make sense. You really look at how those things multiply. And you also need to determine what you're going to do about your risk. I mean, there's 5 things that they mentioned in the article that Tim mentions. You can accept the risk, you can reduce them, you can compensate for them, you can transfer them, or you can avoid them altogether. So that's part of the analysis phase of that too, that kind of requires a human being to look at that. The 4th point here is integration. This one is akin to point 2 regarding traceability. Silos are the enemy of quality, which by its very essence is a cross-functional exercise, of course. By integrating these various areas of the enterprise, the team gains better visibility overall, which leads to faster spotting of issues and increased collaboration, which are all good things. Fifth and finally is reporting. Now, data can be your enemy as easily as it can be your friend. When you have an active tool-based QMS, you create a lot of data. We know this. Being able to dive into all that information and kind of tease out those few critical bits of information that really can move the needle for your enterprise, it really is the difference between a QMS that works really well and one that's really just getting by. So that is a really important piece of this, is understanding that information and what your QMS is telling you and what you're deriving from.
Now, one thing that kind of strikes me about all this is, if you think about it, the evolution of QMS software has, in a sense, followed the evolution of ISO 9001. Because I don't know if you remember, I mean, back in the first version, ISO 9001, 1988 or whatever the heck
87,
it was,
yeah.
87. It was literally just check boxes.
Yeah, it was.
And there was, and everybody did basically the same thing, regardless of whether you manufactured ball bearings or aircraft landing gear or were a service company. It's like everybody did the same thing.
There was very little service, by the way.
There was very little service,
that was registered ISO 9001.
That's true, yeah.
Manufacturing.
So it was all this kind of very constrained, everybody handled the standard the same way. Right. And then as ISO 9001 evolved from a process approach to a process approach, and then looking at risk-based thinking, the software that went along with all this has had to expand as well to encompass greater and greater flexibility for the different companies that are trying to implement a QMS.
Which is great.
Because the original software also was checkbox software. Yeah, exactly.
But that's a great thing for these organizations because, again, it gets you from having a certificate on the wall as the reason to have an ISO 9001 certification to
actually getting value.
Isn't improving your organization and your customer service. So for those of you who are interested in this topic, I think many of you probably are, you're in luck because you don't have to really suffer through me, paraphrasing Tim Lozier's words. We're actually going to be offering a webinar titled 5 Things Your Quality Management System Could Use Right Now and 5 Ways to Get It. It's going to be presented by Tim Lozier himself and hosted by my partner right over here, Dirk. The webinar happens in just a few days on Tuesday, December 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. You can see it right there. So keep an eye on your email inbox if you want to register, or you can click on the story link just below or just to the right of this video player screen, and there's a link in there where you can register for this really interesting webinar.
That's right, and Tim always does a great job.
So check that out.
All right.